What happens when one of Hollywood's most private A-list actresses sits across from one of daytime television's most unfiltered moderators? And a simple question detonates into something nobody in the studio saw coming. The cameras were already rolling. The audience was already clapping. But within minutes, the temperature inside the studio shifted from warm applause to stunned silence. Before we step into this explosive moment, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, like this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is the kind of story you'll want to say you witnessed from the very beginning. Scarlett Johansson walked onto the stage glowing with poise, dressed in sharp elegance, promoting her newest project, a gritty character-driven drama that critics were already whispering about as awards material. She had also been celebrating the latest release from her production company, a bold limited series centered on powerful women navigating political chaos. It was a new chapter for her, stepping more firmly behind the camera, shaping stories instead of simply starring in them. The audience welcomed her like royalty. After all, she had grown up before the world's eyes. From child actor to global blockbuster icon, from indie darling to one of the highest-grossing stars in Hollywood history. Whoopi Goldberg greeted her with that familiar half-smile, equal parts warmth and challenge. "You've done it all," she began. "Action franchises, Oscar-nominated performances, producing. What's left to prove?" Scarlett laughed softly. "It's never about proving. It's about evolving." The conversation flowed easily at first. Scarlett spoke about the emotional depth of her new film, about how motherhood had changed the way she chooses roles, about wanting to create opportunities for new voices. She reflected on her unforgettable moments, standing on the red carpet for the first time as a teenager, feeling terrified and invincible all at once, earning her first major award nomination and calling her mom in tears, saying goodbye to a character that had defined more than a decade of her life in a massive superhero franchise. "It felt like closing a chapter of my youth," she admitted. The crowd leaned in, but then Whoopi pivoted. "There's been a lot of talk," she said calmly, "about pay equity, creative control, and your very public legal battles with studios. Some people say it changed how Hollywood negotiates. Others say it exposed how power really works." Scarlett's smile faded just a touch. "It wasn't about power," she replied. "It was about fairness." Whoopi tilted her head. "Fairness for you, or fairness for everyone?" A murmur rippled through the audience. Scarlett straightened in her chair. "For everyone. When you're in a position to challenge something broken, you do it." "But some critics," Whoopi pressed, "felt the timing was self-serving." The studio lights suddenly felt hotter. Scarlett blinked, her composure sharpening. Standing up for contractual respect isn't self-serving. It sets precedent. There it was, the shift. Subtle but electric. Whoopi didn't back down. Precedent only matters if it changes the system for people who don't have your leverage. Gasps fluttered from the crowd. Scarlett's voice cooled. "You don't think I know that? You don't think I've fought for younger actresses on my sets? For writers? For crew?" The tension was no longer theoretical. It was personal. The audience sat frozen between admiration and shock. Two powerful women. Two different philosophies. One live broadcast. Scarlett leaned forward. "It's easy to critique from the outside. It's harder when you're in the arena." Whoopi's expression hardened just enough. "Honey, I've been in the arena longer than you've been alive." The audience audibly reacted, half laughter, half disbelief. And just like that, the spark became flame. The conversation no longer felt like promotion. It felt like collision. Scarlett inhaled slowly. "With respect, I'm not questioning your experience. But you are questioning my perspective," Whoopi replied. Silence. Heavy. Suspended. Somewhere in the control room, producers exchanged frantic glances. This was not in the rundown. Scarlett's voice trembled, not with fear, but with conviction. "I'm saying that progress doesn't look the same in every era. What you fought for opened doors. What I fight for keeps them open." The audience erupted into applause, but it was fractured, some cheering Scarlett's boldness, others nodding at Whoopi's unshaken composure. And in that moment, the interview transformed into something else entirely. Not hostility. Not exactly. But a raw clash of generational truths. The energy in the room had shifted beyond simple disagreement. It was now about legacy, impact, and who gets to define what real change looks like. And it was only just beginning. The break to commercial came like a lifeline, but the air didn't cool. It thickened. When the cameras returned, the atmosphere was different, tighter, more cautious. Scarlett's shoulders were squared. Whoopi's eyes were steady, calculating. Let's talk about your new series, Whoopi began, tone controlled. It centers on women challenging political corruption. Scarlett nodded. Yes, it's about integrity under pressure. Whoopi didn't miss a beat. So you understand why people expect public figures to take clear stands. There it was again. Scarlett exhaled. I do take stands. Sometimes silence speaks louder. The audience gasped again. Scarlett's expression flickered, hurt then steel. Silence can also be strategy. Not everything has to be shouted to matter. The tension pulsed. Scarlett spoke about balancing activism with privacy, about protecting her family from constant scrutiny. She referenced one of the most meaningful nights of her life, the birth of her child. That changes your compass, she said softly. Suddenly, the noise doesn't matter. The future does. For a moment, Whoopi's face softened. She nodded, understanding the weight of motherhood. But she wasn't finished. You've had unforgettable highs, Whoopi said. Box office records. Global recognition. What about the lows? Scarlett hesitated. The scrutiny. The missteps. The roles that didn't land the way I intended. You mean the controversies? Whoopi asked directly. The audience held its breath. Scarlett met her gaze. Yes. I've learned. I've listened. Growth isn't pretty. The vulnerability shifted the energy again. Not explosive now, exposed. Whoopi leaned back slightly. That's fair. But then came the spark that reignited everything. You said earlier it's harder in the arena, Whoopi said. But remember, some of us built the arena. A collective, echoed through the studio. Scarlett's eyes flashed. And some of us are rebuilding it. The audience gasped louder than before. Producers were no longer pretending this was routine. Scarlett's voice trembled with passion. I respect what you've done. But respect doesn't mean staying quiet when I disagree. Whoopi's tone sharpened. Disagreement is welcome. Dismissal is not. Scarlett leaned back, stunned. I'm not dismissing you. It felt like it. The air felt combustible. And yet, beneath it all, there was something undeniably powerful. 2 generations of influence confronting each other in real time. Scarlett began recounting a memory from early in her career, being told she was too young to understand the business, too inexperienced to demand fairness. I promised myself I would never let anyone shrink my voice again, she said. Whoopi nodded slowly. And I promised myself I'd never let anyone forget the fight it took to get here. The tension was no longer anger. It was history colliding with evolution. By the final segment, the audience was visibly shaken. Social media notifications were already lighting up phones in the crowd. Scarlett offered one last reflection. My journey, from a teenage actress navigating fame to producing stories I believe in, has been about growth. I'm proud of my new film. I'm proud of this series. But I'm most proud of learning. Whoopi responded, quieter now. Growth doesn't stop. Not for you. Not for me. The applause was hesitant at first. Then louder. Then thunderous. But the real explosion happened after the credits rolled. Clips hit the internet within minutes. Headlines screamed about an explosive argument. Comment sections divided into camps. Some accused Whoopi of cornering her guest. Others praised her for asking hard questions. Many applauded Scarlett for holding her ground. By evening, trending topics carried both their names. Analysts dissected every word. Body language experts weighed in. Think pieces debated generational activism in Hollywood. Yet insiders revealed something surprising. Backstage, there was no shouting. No slammed doors. Just 2 women standing face to face, breathing in the aftermath of honesty. Scarlett reportedly said, I hope that didn't come off as disrespect. Whoopi allegedly replied, passion never offends me. Silence does. The audience who witnessed it live would later describe the moment as electric and uncomfortable but necessary. One attendee posted, it felt like watching history argue with the future. In the days that followed, Scarlett's new projects saw a surge in interest. Interviews became sharper, more introspective. Whoopi addressed the moment on the next show, reminding viewers that dialogue isn't supposed to be comfortable. The confrontation didn't end careers. It amplified voices. And now the question turns to you. Was it an explosive argument, or a powerful exchange the industry needed to see? Did Scarlett stand her ground with grace, or did Whoopi rightfully challenge her perspective? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you want more cinematic, intense stories that put you right inside the heat of the moment, subscribe to Talk Flair, like this video, and join the conversation. Because in Hollywood, The brightest lights always cast the boldest shadows, and we'll be right here to tell you all about it. The commercial break ended, but the tension didn't. Behind the forced smiles and studio lighting, something had shifted. You could feel it in the way the audience clutched their cue cards a little tighter, in the way the co-hosts avoided eye contact, in the way Scarlett Johansson crossed her legs with deliberate calm, as if steadying herself before stepping back into a ring she never planned to enter. The red light blinked on. Whoopi Goldberg turned toward Scarlett again, her expression composed but unmistakably firm. "We're back," she said smoothly, though the edge beneath her voice hadn't disappeared. "And we're talking about evolution, personal, professional, generational." Scarlett nodded, offering a polite smile. But her eyes were sharper now. Focused. Whoopi leaned forward. "You've had one of the most extraordinary careers of your generation. From indie films that earned you critical acclaim to billion-dollar franchises that redefined action cinema. And now, you're stepping fully into producing. That's power." Scarlett inhaled slowly. "It's responsibility." "Same thing," Whoopi replied. A ripple of laughter moved through the audience, but it was nervous laughter. Scarlett began speaking about her newest film, a character-driven psychological drama where she plays a woman confronting the consequences of moral compromise. "It's not flashy," she explained. "It's uncomfortable. It forces you to sit with decisions that don't have clean answers." Whoopi's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Like this conversation?" The audience gasped again. Scarlett paused, just a beat too long. "Maybe," she said finally, voice steady. The camera zoomed closer. Every blink felt amplified. Scarlett continued, describing how the role pushed her emotionally in ways she hadn't experienced since her early award-nominated performances. She talked about staying up late rereading scenes, questioning motivations, feeling vulnerable in front of the crew. "There's a freedom in not trying to be likable," she admitted. "In letting the character be flawed." Whoopi tilted her head. "Is that something you struggle with? Being liked?" A murmur ran through the audience. Scarlett didn't flinch this time. "Of course. I've been in the public eye since I was a kid. You learn quickly that approval can become addictive." The honesty landed heavily. She reflected on unforgettable moments in her life. The first time she saw her name above a movie title and felt the weight of expectation. The night she stood backstage at a major awards ceremony, heart racing, knowing millions were watching. The day she said goodbye to her longtime Marvel character, filming her final scene and crying in her trailer afterward. "It felt like letting go of a version of myself," she said quietly. For a moment, Whoopi softened. "You grew up in this business," she acknowledged. "That's not easy." Scarlett nodded. "No, it's not." But then Whoopi shifted again, her tone tightening just slightly. "Yet some would say growing up in the system also protects you from the harsher edges of it." The temperature dropped. Scarlett's jaw set. "I wouldn't call it protection. You had access," Whoopi pressed. "Opportunities many never see." "And I worked for them," Scarlett replied, her voice sharpening for the first time in part 2. The audience felt it immediately, the undercurrent of pride. Scarlett leaned forward. "There's this narrative that success handed itself to me. It didn't. I auditioned. I failed. I was told no more times than I can count. But you were still in the room," Whoopi countered. Silence. Scarlett's breath hitched, barely noticeable, but the camera caught it. "And you weren't?" Scarlett asked carefully. A collective inhale from the audience. Whoopi's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in recognition of the challenge. "I fought to be in rooms that weren't built for me. And I'm fighting to reshape the ones I'm in," Scarlett replied. The words collided midair. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably, attempting to interject. "Maybe what we're seeing is different kinds of battles." But Whoopi raised her hand slightly, signaling she wasn't done. "You've also been vocal about creative control," Whoopi said. "About how your recent legal dispute with a major studio changed distribution conversations." Scarlett nodded. "Yes. Some insiders called it a turning point," Whoopi continued. "Others called it a power play." Scarlett's composure cracked, just slightly. It wasn't about ego. It was about honoring agreements. "But do you think emerging actors could have taken that risk?" Whoopi asked pointedly. Scarlett hesitated. And in that hesitation, the audience leaned forward. "No," she admitted. "Not without consequences." "Exactly," Whoopi said quietly. The studio felt split down the middle. Scarlett's voice grew more impassioned. "That's why it matters when someone who can take the hit does. It shifts leverage. But it doesn't erase inequality," Whoopi replied. The tension escalated, not loud, not chaotic, but sharp, deliberate, intellectual. Scarlett clasped her hands together. Progress isn't instant. Whoopi met her gaze steadily. Neither was the fight that got you here. A hush fell. Scarlett's expression flickered, frustration, then reflection. She pivoted slightly. I've had defining moments in my life that changed my understanding of impact, she said. Becoming a mother, launching my own production company, watching young actresses step onto my sets with confidence I never had. Her voice softened. I want them to feel protected. And do they? Whoopi asked. Scarlett blinked. I hope so. The vulnerability disarmed the tension, temporarily. The audience clapped gently, sensing the emotional shift. But Whoopi wasn't finished peeling back layers. You've also faced criticism, she said. Roles that sparked controversy. Public missteps. How did those moments shape you? Scarlett inhaled slowly. They humbled me. She described reading headlines that painted her as out of touch. Feeling misunderstood. Questioning her instincts. I realized intent doesn't erase impact, she admitted. The crowd murmured in approval. And what did you do with that realization? Whoopi pressed. I listened, Scarlett replied. I educated myself. I stepped back when necessary. The exchange felt less combative now, more probing. Yet underneath it, a current still buzzed. Whoopi folded her hands. Listening is powerful, but sometimes speaking is too. Scarlett's eyes flashed again. You keep implying I haven't spoken, she said quietly. I'm asking where your voice carries the most weight, Whoopi answered. The air tightened. Scarlett straightened. My voice carries weight in my work, in the projects I greenlight, in the people I hire, and on issues outside your films? Whoopi asked. There it was, the question that ignited everything again. Scarlett's composure faltered for a split second. I don't perform activism for applause. Gasps. Whoopi's expression hardened. Nobody said perform. But the expectation feels performative, Scarlett shot back. The audience audibly reacted, some applauding, some whispering. Whoopi leaned in, voice firm. Accountability isn't performance. And neither is privacy, Scarlett replied. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the studio crew seemed frozen. For a brief second, it looked like the conversation might derail entirely. Then Scarlett surprised everyone. She exhaled. You know what? She said, voice trembling slightly. Maybe I am still figuring out what responsibility looks like at this stage of my life. The honesty shifted the room again. Whoopi studied her carefully. Fair, she said finally. The word landed like a ceasefire. Scarlett continued, more reflective now. When I think about my career, from a nervous teenager navigating red carpets to producing stories about political corruption and moral conflict, I see growth. But growth isn't linear. The audience nodded, softer applause filling the space. Whoopi leaned back slightly, evaluating. You've had remarkable highs, she said. Box office dominance, critical respect, financial power. But legacy isn't built on comfort. Scarlett met her gaze. Neither is survival. Another ripple through the crowd. The final minutes of the segment approached, but the tension refused to fully dissolve. Whoopi offered one last question before the break. If a young actress is watching right now, someone without your platform, what do you tell her about navigating power? Scarlett didn't hesitate this time. I tell her to know her worth before the world assigns it to her, to build alliances, to protect her peace, and to understand that sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the strongest. The audience erupted in applause. Whoopi nodded slowly. And sometimes silence speaks louder than you intend. The applause faltered. The red light dimmed again. Another commercial break. But this time, no one relaxed. Because what started as a promotional interview had turned into something far more volatile. Two women standing at different crossroads of influence, neither willing to shrink. And the storm was far from over. When the show returned from break, the energy had transformed from sharp tension into something heavier, almost philosophical. The audience no longer buzzed with anticipation. They sat still, watching carefully, as if aware they were witnessing something bigger than a daytime interview. Scarlett Johansson adjusted the microphone on her blazer, her expression controlled, but no longer guarded. Whoopi Goldberg folded her hands on the table, eyes steady, posture grounded. Neither woman looked rattled, but both looked changed. The co-host attempted to lighten the tone. Scarlett, let's talk about this new chapter. You've stepped into producing in a major way. Your limited series about political corruption is already generating serious conversation. Scarlett nodded. It's the most personal project I've ever developed. Why? Whoopi asked quietly. Scarlett paused, searching for the right words. Because it's about compromise. About the cost of ambition. About what happens when your ideals meet power. A subtle reaction moved through the crowd. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Whoopi leaned forward slightly. And what conclusion does your character come to? That power reveals who you are, Scarlett said. It doesn't change you. It amplifies you. The words hung in the air. Whoopi studied her. Do you believe that about yourself? Scarlett didn't answer immediately. Instead, she exhaled, glancing down for just a second before meeting Whoopi's gaze again. I think success amplified my insecurities at first, she admitted. When I became one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood, people treated it like a headline. But I felt pressure. I felt isolated. I felt like if I slipped once, it would all collapse. The audience was quiet now, no gasps, no murmurs. Just attention. Scarlett continued. One of the most unforgettable nights of my life was winning a major acting award after years of being nominated. I remember standing backstage, holding the trophy, thinking, this doesn't fix doubt. It doesn't silence critics. It just raises expectations. Whoopi nodded slowly. Fame is loud, she said. But it's also lonely. Scarlett's eyes softened at that. And you've lived it longer than I have, she replied. The temperature in the room shifted again, less adversarial, more reflective. But Whoopi wasn't finished pushing. You talk about isolation, Whoopi continued. Yet you've also built an empire. Production deals, brand launches, strategic partnerships. That's not just survival, that's control. Scarlett tilted her head. Control is an illusion. The audience reacted softly. You think so? Whoopi asked. Yes, Scarlett replied. Because the internet can turn on you in seconds. A headline can redefine you overnight. I've experienced that. She referenced public controversies she had faced in the past. Roles that sparked backlash, interviews that were misinterpreted, business decisions that became cultural debates. I've been called insensitive, opportunistic, detached, she said. And sometimes I deserved criticism. Sometimes I didn't. But either way, it forces you to confront yourself. Whoopi crossed her arms slightly. And what did you confront? My blind spots, Scarlett answered without hesitation. My privilege. My defensiveness. A noticeable murmur of respect rippled through the crowd. Scarlett leaned forward now, her voice steadier than before. You asked earlier whether I was fighting just for myself. That question stuck with me. Whoopi's expression remained unreadable. When I renegotiated contracts, when I challenged distribution models, yes, it affected me directly, Scarlett said. But I was also thinking about the actresses who'd come after me. If I didn't use leverage when I had it, what was the point? But leverage isn't universal, Whoopi replied. Not everyone gets that seat at the table. And that's exactly why it has to be used strategically, Scarlett countered. There was again that spark. The audience felt it reignite, though not explosively this time. It burned lower, steadier. Whoopi leaned back. Strategy is different from solidarity. Scarlett's jaw tightened. You think I'm not in solidarity with other women in this industry? I think solidarity requires visible risk, Whoopi said calmly. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the crowd. Scarlett's voice rose, not shouting, but impassioned. You think I haven't taken risks? I think you've taken calculated ones, Whoopi replied. The words landed hard. Scarlett blinked. The accusation wasn't loud, but it was precise. Calculated, Scarlett repeated softly. Yes, because reckless decisions don't protect anyone. The audience clapped lightly at that, unsure which side they were applauding. Scarlett's composure shifted again, not defensive now, but determined. When I launched my production company, I didn't just hire my friends. I sought out female directors who hadn't gotten studio backing. I funded scripts that had been sitting in drawers for years. I sat in meetings where executives questioned whether stories led by complex women would sell. She paused. And I said yes anyway. Applause swelled louder. Whoopi nodded once. That matters. But it's not flashy, Scarlett continued. It's not a viral moment. It's long-term. Whoopi studied her carefully, as if recalibrating. You're building legacy, she said. I'm trying to, Scarlett replied. A beat passed. And legacy isn't just awards, Whoopi added. Scarlett smiled faintly. No, it's impact. The tension seemed to ease, but then Whoopi delivered one final curveball. Impact requires discomfort, she said. Are you willing to be uncomfortable in public? The question pierced. Scarlett didn't hesitate this time. I am uncomfortable right now. The audience reacted with nervous laughter. And yet you're still here, Whoopi replied. Yes, Scarlett said firmly. Because growth doesn't happen in echo chambers. Silence. Then applause, stronger than before. For the first time since the confrontation began, it felt less like a clash and more like a reckoning. Scarlett's tone softened. You said earlier that some of you built the arena. You're right. You did. You broke ceilings I never had to look up at. Whoopi's expression shifted slightly, surprised. But building something doesn't mean it's finished, Scarlett continued. My generation inherits it, and we're responsible for reinforcing it, reshaping it, expanding it. The audience erupted again. Whoopi leaned forward slowly. And what happens when the next generation challenges you? Scarlett smiled, genuinely this time. Then I hope I listen. That answer lingered. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Whoopi nodded, a subtle acknowledgement. Good. The final segment countdown began in the control room, but something unexpected had happened. The confrontation had matured. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about perspective. Scarlett took a breath. One of the most special moments of my life wasn't an award or a box office record. It was sitting at home with my child, realizing that none of this, the interviews, the debates, the headlines, matters more than who I am when the cameras are off. The vulnerability shifted the entire atmosphere. Whoopi's eyes softened. That's wisdom. Scarlett nodded. It took me a long time to get there. The audience applauded warmly. And I don't claim to have it all figured out, Scarlett added. But I'm trying. In my work. In my business. In how I show up. Whoopi leaned back, considering her. You know, she said, real conversations are messy. Scarlett let out a quiet laugh. This qualifies. The audience laughed too, this time freely. But even as the tension diffused, there was still a sense that something unfinished hovered between them. Not hostility. Not resentment. Just unresolved questions about power, responsibility, and what public figures owe the world. The closing music began to rise faintly in the background. Whoopi turned to Scarlett one last time before the show wrapped. I don't question your talent, she said calmly. I question what you'll do with it. Scarlett met her gaze head-on. Watch me, she replied. The audience gasped, then burst into thunderous applause. And just like that, the credits began to roll. But what happened after the cameras stopped would ripple far beyond that studio. The applause didn't stop when the credits rolled. It intensified. Some audience members stood. Others remained seated, stunned, as if unsure whether they had just witnessed a disagreement or a defining cultural moment. Scarlett Johansson and Whoopi Goldberg were still seated at the table as the theme music faded, but the energy between them had changed again. It wasn't combative now. It was charged, like two storms that had collided and then passed through each other, leaving the air electric. Stagehands moved cautiously. Producers whispered urgently into headsets. Phones were already lighting up across the studio as audience members checked social media. Clips were spreading in real time. Scarlett removed her mic slowly, her fingers steady despite everything that had just unfolded. Whoopi stood first. For a split second, the room held its breath. Then Whoopi extended her hand. Scarlett looked at it, just for a moment, before standing and taking it firmly. The audience exhaled as if they'd all been holding oxygen hostage. There was no dramatic embrace. No whispered apology that cameras could capture. Just eye contact. Respect. A silent acknowledgement that neither woman had backed down, and neither had walked away. Backstage, the atmosphere buzzed like a newsroom during breaking headlines. Publicists were already strategizing. Scarlett's team huddled near the dressing room, discussing talking points for the inevitable media storm. Whoopi's producers reviewed clips, aware that the internet would dissect every glance, every pause, every word. Within minutes, trending topics began forming. Scarlett versus Whoopi. Explosive on the view. Calculated or courageous. Comment sections divided instantly. Some viewers praised Whoopi for holding a powerful actress accountable, arguing that tough questions are necessary in an era of curated celebrity narratives. Others defended Scarlett fiercely, applauding her composure and willingness to engage without retreating. One viral post read, "This wasn't drama. This was two generations debating what responsibility looks like." Another declared, Scarlett stood her ground. Period. Entertainment journalists began uploading reaction videos before the hour was over. Body language experts analyzed posture shifts. Cultural commentators debated the meaning behind the word calculated. But beyond the noise, something more personal was unfolding backstage. Scarlett sat alone in her dressing room for a moment, staring at her reflection in the mirror framed by bright bulbs. The weight of the exchange settled in, not as regret, but as reflection. She replayed the key moments in her mind. You were still in the room. Calculated. Solidarity requires visible risk. The words echoed. Her phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, some cautionary. A text from a fellow actress read, "Proud of you for not shrinking." Another message from a longtime mentor simply said, "Growth is uncomfortable." Across the hallway, Whoopi removed her glasses and leaned back in her chair. She had hosted thousands of conversations. She had weathered controversies, political debates, emotional interviews. But this one lingered differently, because it wasn't about scandal. It was about evolution. A producer stepped in carefully. "You okay?" Whoopi nodded slowly. "She's smart," she said. "She's still learning." Back in the studio lobby, audience members recorded selfie videos describing what they had just witnessed. It felt intense. It felt necessary. It felt real. The word real kept surfacing. By evening, major entertainment outlets had headlines ready. Analysts framed it as a clash of generational activism, old guard versus new guard. Others rejected that narrative entirely, calling it a layered discussion about power in Hollywood. Scarlett's newest film suddenly saw a spike in search traffic. Her limited political drama series trended on streaming platforms. Interviews she had done months earlier resurfaced, re-examined through the lens of this confrontation. But perhaps the most powerful reaction came from aspiring artists. Young actresses posted messages about knowing their worth. Film students debated strategy versus solidarity. Women in corporate industries unrelated to Hollywood shared clips, relating to the tension between privacy and public responsibility. The conversation had escaped the studio, and that's when it became bigger than either of them. The following morning, Whoopi addressed it briefly at the top of the show. "Conversations aren't supposed to be comfortable," she said calmly. "They're supposed to be honest." She didn't apologize. She didn't escalate. She reframed. Later that day, Scarlett released a short statement through her team. Not defensive, not reactive. "I respect platforms that allow space for challenging dialogue," it read. "Growth comes from listening as much as speaking." It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. The narrative began to shift again. Instead of explosive argument, commentators started calling it a necessary exchange. Instead of clash, they used collision of perspective. Privately, sources hinted that Scarlett had reached out to Whoopi after the broadcast. Not to retract anything, not to smooth it over for optics, but to continue the conversation. Because that's what had truly happened on that stage. Not a meltdown, not a feud, a confrontation of ideas. And sometimes ideas collide loudly. Weeks later, during a press event for her new film, Scarlett was asked about the moment. She paused thoughtfully before answering. "I think when strong women disagree publicly, it makes people uncomfortable," she said. But discomfort isn't always a bad thing. The room had nodded. Meanwhile, Whoopi referenced the exchange in another episode, reflecting on how every generation believes it's redefining change. "And maybe they are," she added. There was no lingering bitterness, just awareness. But here's the truth. Moments like that don't fade easily. They embed themselves in cultural memory. Years from now, people may look back at that clip not for the raised voices, but for the questions asked. What does responsibility look like when you have influence? Is calculated action weaker than visible risk? Does silence protect, or does it distance? Scarlett's career continued to expand. Her production slate grew bolder. She backed projects from emerging filmmakers. She stepped into more complex roles, characters layered with moral ambiguity and strength. Whoopi continued moderating conversations that challenged celebrities and politicians alike, refusing to soften questions simply because a guest was powerful. Neither woman retreated. And that might be the most explosive outcome of all. Because in a world where public figures often dodge confrontation, they stayed. They faced each other. They didn't crumble. They didn't collapse into PR-managed politeness. They stood in the discomfort. And that's why the audience gasped. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was rare. Now we turn it over to you. Was it an explosive argument or a powerful conversation the culture needed to see? Did Scarlett Johansson defend her position with strength? Or did Whoopi Goldberg rightfully demand more accountability? Was it calculated or courageous? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. We want to hear your perspective. And if you crave more intense, cinematic breakdowns of celebrity moments that shake the spotlight, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, like this video, and join our growing community. Because when Hollywood's brightest stars collide, the sparks don't just fly, they illuminate everything.